her father died before harvest. The cowboy finished the field and said, "It's done." The twin suns of Nova Dakota beat down on the dusty plains, turning the soil to a pale, almost white powder. The wind swept across the open fields in soft, whispering waves, carrying the smell of metal and dry grass. Caleb Vance rode slowly along the cracked dirt road, his boots resting lightly in the stirrups. The wide-brimmed hat on his head cast a shadow over his eyes, but it did little to shield him from the sharp glare of the suns. He hadn't been back to his father's homestead in nearly a year, not since the last harvest, and certainly not since his father had passed. The old man had been strong and stubborn, like the land he tilled, but the reactor leak that had taken him had left no room for stubbornness. Now Caleb was alone, carrying the weight of the farm and the memory of his father in each measured step of his hover horse across the dust. The homestead came into view, small and quiet against the vast horizon. Its walls were a dull, metallic gray, chipped and worn from years of storms and neglect. The solar panels on the roof were cracked, some missing entirely, and the wind turbines that lined the edge of the field had stopped turning long ago. Even from a distance, Caleb could see the field stretching out behind the house, half-plowed, the soil rough and broken where the last machines had stopped. He dismounted slowly, the boots of his hover horse sinking slightly into the soft ground. His fingers brushed the smooth metal of the plowbot controls tucked at his belt. Caleb had been working machines since he was a boy, and he knew exactly how much effort it would take to bring the farm back to life. Yet, despite the exhaustion that pressed against his bones, he felt a quiet determination settle in his chest. This farm, his father's farm, would be finished. No one else would touch it. Inside the house, the air was still and stale. Dust covered the furniture like a soft gray blanket, and the hum of broken electronics made the silence feel heavier. Caleb moved from room to room, eyes scanning for anything useful. There were jars of preserved food on the shelves, some still sealed, some cracked, and the hollow diary his father had left was resting on the counter, waiting. He powered it on. A soft blue light flickered, and his father's face appeared, eyes tired but bright, voice steady. "If you're seeing this, Caleb, it means I didn't make it through the season. The storms are worse than last year, and there's more than just weather to worry about. Zyther Corp is moving across Nova Dakota. They don't care about the soil or the crops, only what's beneath it. You must finish the harvest before they come." Caleb listened in silence. His jaw tightened. Zyther Corp was a corporate giant known for claiming planets, building mining stations and leaving nothing but dust behind. That his father had worried about them meant things were worse than he imagined. He closed the diary and let the glow fade. There was work to be done. Outside, the plowbot stood motionless in the field, its old circuits fried from the last ion storm. Caleb ran his fingers along the cold metal, remembering the hours he had spent as a boy fixing these machines under his father's watchful eyes. He knelt and checked the engine, opened the panels, and began to make repairs. Sparks flew in tiny showers as he rewired circuits and replaced broken modules. Hours passed in a rhythm of careful adjustments and quiet muttering. The suns began to lower, casting long shadows across the field. Caleb stood, wiping sweat from his brow, and looked at the horizon. The plains were empty, but the wind carried a whisper of movement, distant, fleeting. Perhaps it was a dust animal, or perhaps it was a scout from Zyther Corp. Either way, it reminded him that time was running out. He climbed to the top of the small hill beside the farm and looked back at the fields. Half-plowed rows stretched like tired fingers across the land. If he worked alone, it could take weeks to finish. But he had no choice. There was no one else left who cared about this farm the way he did. No one else who would understand why a field, a few stalks of energy crop, mattered so much. As night fell, the skies of Nova Dakota came alive. Stars blinked cold and distant, and the twin moons rose, casting pale light on the earth. Caleb lit a small lamp inside the house and sat at the table, laying out blueprints for the old harvesters. He traced circuits and pathways with careful fingers, making notes on where to adjust the machinery to withstand both the storms and possible intrusions. The way he laughed when Caleb first learned to ride a hover horse, the quiet evenings when they had counted stars together, speaking of faraway planets, and always the lesson repeated in gentle but firm tones. A farm is more than soil. It's life, Caleb. Finish what you start. He would finish it. He could feel the weight of his father's words, and the resolve in them passed down to him like a baton. Tomorrow, he would begin the harvest. Sleep came fitfully that night, broken by the wind howling across the plains, rattling the walls and whistling through broken windows. Caleb dreamed of machines moving in perfect rhythm across the fields, glowing softly under the suns. He dreamed of stalks of energy crops, bending but unbroken, reaching skyward. And he dreamed of shadows in the distance, strangers on strange machines, moving across the plains, coming for what his father had protected. The next morning, Caleb rose before the suns. The light was harsh, burning the dust into bright gold. He donned his worn jacket, strapped on a tool belt heavy with spanners, wires, and calibrators, and headed out to the field. The plowbot was ready, repaired carefully through the night, its circuits humming with faint blue light. Caleb climbed onto the driver's seat, adjusted the controls, and guided the machine forward. The soil resisted at first, hard and dry from weeks without care. But as the plowbot moved, Caleb adjusted its path, guiding it with the touch of hands used to decades of farming. The machine rumbled and shook, and in the distance the first row of soil turned under its blades. Caleb's heart lifted. This was the first step, the beginning of fulfilling his father's final wish. He worked through the morning, and as he did, the wind carried whispers from the plains. The land seemed alive, as if it recognized the effort and returned a quiet acknowledgement. Birds, rare on this planet, flew low across the sky, and small dust creatures scuttled across the fields. For the first time in a long while, Caleb felt that the farm was waking up again. By midday, the first section of the field was finished. Caleb climbed down from the plowbot and surveyed his work. Lines of freshly turned soil stretched in neat rows, and though the sun was high and the dust thick, a sense of accomplishment filled him. He allowed himself a brief smile, remembering how proud his father would have been. But the peace did not last long. A flicker on the horizon caught his eye, too deliberate to be dust. Caleb squinted against the sun and saw a glint of metal moving across the plains. Someone was out there. Perhaps a wanderer, or perhaps an early scout of Zithercorp. Either way, the reminder was clear. Time was short. Caleb returned to the house, refilled the plowbot's energy cells, and checked the defensive drones stationed around the perimeter. They were old, patched together from spare parts, but they would serve as warning devices if anyone approached too closely. The work was exhausting, but there was no hesitation. Every step, every repair, every row plowed was a promise to his father, a vow that this land would be cared for no matter the cost. As the suns dipped toward the horizon again, Caleb stood at the edge of the field, looking over the rows he had completed. The wind carried the faint hum of the machines, and for a moment, the homestead felt alive again. It was a fragile life, delicate and temporary, but it was enough. And Caleb knew deep in his heart that this was only the beginning. The farm, the land, and his father's legacy were waiting. Tomorrow, he would continue, and no matter what shadows moved across the plains, no matter what storms came, he would see it done. For Caleb Vance, the cowboy of Nova Dakota, the empty homestead was no longer just a place of loss. It was the first chapter of a story he would finish. The story of the field, the harvest, and the quiet strength passed down from a father to his son. The next morning, Nova Dakota's twin suns rose over the horizon, bathing the fields in pale golden light. Caleb Vance was already awake, tending to the plowbot that had worked tirelessly the day before. Its circuits hummed softly, a gentle rhythm in the quiet morning. The soil had begun to take shape, rose straight and even under the careful guidance of machine and man. Caleb adjusted the energy cells on the plowbot and double-checked the sensors. Everything needed to be perfect. Every row, every seed, every stalk mattered. The wind carried hints of distant movement, and he scanned the horizon carefully. Nova Dakota was beautiful, but it was also unforgiving. Dust storms could appear without warning, and strangers could travel the plains silently, hidden behind the heat waves and sand. It was during one of these scans that Caleb first saw them, a group of figures moving along the ridges in the distance. At first they looked like dust shapes, shadows twisted by the light, but as they came closer he could see the gleam of metal and the strange shapes of machines attached to their bodies. Outlaws. Caleb's heart tightened. He had encountered travelers before, wanderers and traders, but these were different. Their machines were rough, patched together with bits of scrap metal welded onto their frames. Some of them carried solar shields on their arms, others had small hover boosters that lifted them slightly off the ground. They moved with purpose, scanning the land as if looking for something to claim. Caleb didn't panic. He knew how to handle situations like this. He had grown up learning the land, learning its rhythms and its secrets. He slid off the plowbot and crouched behind a small ridge near the edge of the field. From there he could watch without being seen. The outlaws reached the edge of the field and stopped. They looked at the plowbot. tilting their heads as if puzzled by its old design. Caleb recognized the curiosity in their movements. They had never seen such a machine in action. The Plowbot was a relic, built before Zithercorp had taken over much of Nova Dakota, a symbol of an older way of life. One of the outlaws, taller than the rest and with glowing green optics in place of eyes, stepped forward. He bent down and pressed a hand against the Plowbot's side. Caleb could see him scanning the circuits, trying to understand the ancient technology. The others whispered among themselves, pointing at the fields, gesturing to Caleb's homestead in the distance. Caleb decided it was time to act. He reached into his tool belt and pulled out a small portable energy flare. It was a simple device, more for distraction than harm. He activated it, and a bright flash of light shot into the sky, spinning in slow circles as it hovered above the field. The outlaws blinked, startled, and the tall one cursed softly under his breath. Caleb didn't wait. He stepped out from his hiding place and raised his hands slightly, calling to them. "You don't need to take anything," he said. His voice was calm but firm, carrying across the dusty plain. "This farm is under my care. You can move along without trouble." The outlaws froze. A small mechanical bird, one of their companions, hovered near them, chirping softly. It looked at Caleb with something almost like curiosity. The tall outlaw took a step forward. "Who are you, stranger?" he asked. His voice was rough, but there was no anger in it, only interest. Caleb straightened, resting a hand lightly on the Plowbot. "My name is Caleb Vance. This land belonged to my father, and now it belongs to me. I'm finishing the harvest. There's nothing here for you to take." The group exchanged quiet words. Caleb noticed they were not armed in the traditional sense. No guns, no lasers, no weapons that could harm. Their tools were for survival, for scavenging, for moving across the harsh plains of Nova Dakota. Still, they were a threat, if Caleb misstepped. The tall one stepped closer, tilting his head. "You're brave to stand here alone," he said. "Most people would have fled by now. But bravery doesn't always mean safety. Zithercorp is moving across this land. You might think they're far, but they're not. And neither are we." Caleb frowned, his mind racing. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "If it's the farm, it's not for sale. If it's the crop, you won't touch it." The outlaw smiled faintly. "We're not here for the farm," he said. "We're curious. We've seen the storms, the Plowbots, the way you care for this land. Not many do. Zithercorp takes, destroys, and moves on. You fight with respect. That's rare." Caleb lowered his hands slightly. Respect was something his father had taught him. Respect for the soil, for the machines, for the life that grew in the dust. "Then what do you want?" he asked again. "Information," the outlaw said. "We travel, watch, learn. We hear rumors of someone finishing the old fields, someone taking care of the energy crop underground. That's a rare thing to do. If Zithercorp finds it, they'll take it. If they take it, it's gone forever. We want to know if you can protect it." Caleb nodded slowly. He had expected Zithercorp to send mercenaries, enforcers, maybe even armed drones. But these outlaws were different. They were observers, perhaps scavengers, but they had a code, an understanding of what was valuable beyond money. "I can protect it," he said. "I won't let anyone take it." The tall outlaw studied him for a long moment. Then he straightened and motioned to the others. "We'll leave you be, for now. But watch the skies, cowboy. Not everyone respects the fields, and not everyone moves slowly across the dust. Zithercorp is coming, and when they do, things will change." With that, the group moved away, disappearing into the shimmer of heat and dust along the horizon. Caleb watched them go, feeling a mixture of relief and tension. The plains of Nova Dakota were empty now again, but he knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Caleb returned to the Plowbot, adjusting the sensors and checking the circuits again. He worked steadily, plowing the next section of the field, row by row as the suns climbed higher in the sky. Each row completed felt like a small victory, but the knowledge of distant observers reminded him that the true test had not yet come. By midday, the field was half plowed. Caleb paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and looked around. The land seemed quiet, but he sensed a subtle hum in the air, a vibration of movement in the distance. He scanned the horizon again. Nothing. Just the wind and the faint shimmer of heat waves across the plains. He allowed himself a brief break, sitting beneath the shade of a small metal windmill. His mind wandered to his father again. He remembered evenings spent repairing old machines, listening to stories about the frontier before the corporations arrived. Those stories had seemed like fairy tales at the time, but now they were warnings, lessons in survival, patience, and courage. Caleb thought about the harvest, about finishing what his father had started. He thought about the energy crop beneath the soil, its glow faint but steady in the underground chambers, waiting to be collected. Every step he took, every row he plowed, was a promise kept. As afternoon approached, the wind picked up. Small dust clouds swirled across the field, and Caleb noticed movement again. Small, distant, almost hidden in the haze. His heart quickened. He didn't know if it was another group of travelers, Zyther Corp scouts, or something else entirely. He rose from his resting spot and adjusted the plowbot. "Time to finish this section," he muttered. The machine rumbled to life under his hands, engines humming softly, blades cutting into the soil. Caleb guided it carefully, making adjustments for uneven terrain and hidden rocks. He moved with precision, like a dancer across the dusty stage of his father's field. Hours passed. The suns began to lower again, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. Caleb completed the section he had started, rose perfectly straight, soil turned and ready. He stood at the edge of the field, looking back at his work, satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. This was only the beginning, but it was a good beginning. And as he watched, the wind carried a faint whisper across the plains, a reminder that he was not alone. Out there, beyond the horizon, others were moving. Some were curious, some were interested, and some, he knew, would come to test the strength of the man who dared finish the harvest on Nova Dakota. Caleb smiled faintly, a quiet determination in his eyes. He would finish what his father had started. He would protect the land. And no matter what came across the plains, he would see it done. The suns of Nova Dakota dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the plowed rows. Caleb Vance wiped sweat from his brow, surveying the field he had worked all day. The soil gleamed faintly under the twin lights, turned over in neat rows, ready for the next stage. The plowbot stood silently beside him, its hum low but steady, like a heartbeat in the stillness. For a moment the farm felt alive again. Dust swirled in golden streams across the horizon, and the wind carried a faint scent of ozone, a reminder of the storms that could arrive at any time. Caleb took a deep breath and stretched. The work had been exhausting, but the promise of finishing the harvest gave him strength. And then he noticed it, a small shimmer flickering across the far edge of the field. At first, he thought it might be the heat of the setting suns, reflecting off distant rocks, but it moved too deliberately, gliding in smooth arcs over the dunes. Caleb's pulse quickened. He had expected the outlaws to stay away, and he had hoped Zyther Corp scouts would still be far off. But this shimmer, this deliberate movement, felt different. He moved closer to the ridge that bordered the field and squinted against the fading light. Hover drones, sleek, silent, and hovering just above the sand, their lights glowed faintly, scanning the field. Caleb recognized them immediately. Zyther Corp used drones for surveying land and mapping resources. If they found the energy crop beneath the soil, the farm would be claimed in a single day. He didn't panic. His father had prepared for situations like this, leaving blueprints for hidden passages and underground chambers where the crops grew. Caleb ran back to the house and opened a small trapdoor under the floorboards. A cool draft greeted him from below, carrying the faint smell of growing plants and damp soil. The energy crop thrived here, glowing softly in the dim light, a pale blue that seemed almost alive. Caleb moved quickly, checking the growth and making notes. Rows of delicate stalks swayed gently, their energy pulses faint but steady. These crops weren't just valuable, they were fragile. Too much exposure or rough handling could damage them, and Zyther Corp's drones were already mapping the area, analyzing the ground for signs of hidden cultivation. He climbed back to the surface and adjusted the plowbot, preparing it for defensive measures. Not weapons, he didn't want conflict, but sensors and flares that could distract and mislead the drones if they came closer. The wind carried a faint metallic hum as the drones moved along the perimeter, scanning the horizon. Caleb guided the plowbot carefully, planting small energy beacons in the soil that would confuse scanners and hide the underground crop. Hours passed, and the suns finally disappeared behind the dunes, leaving the land bathed in the soft glow of the moons. Caleb paused, leaning against the plowbot, and listened. The drones continued to hum faintly, their lights flickering as they passed over the field, but they showed no immediate sign of detecting the underground crop. He allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. His father would have been proud. The farm was still intact, and the harvest was progressing. But Caleb knew that peace was temporary on Nova Dakota. The drones were only the first step. Zythercorp wouldn't send just machines. Sooner or later, human representatives would arrive, officials who didn't care about soil, crops, or life, only profit and resources. Caleb moved back underground to check the energy crop again. The plants responded to his presence, their soft glow intensifying slightly, as if recognizing him. He smiled faintly. This was why he worked so hard. This was why he endured the storms, the dust, the isolation. The field, his father's legacy, and the glowing crop beneath it deserved care. He spent the night carefully tending to the plants, adjusting irrigation systems, checking nutrient cycles, and monitoring growth. Time passed slowly underground, the hum of machinery above blending with the soft glow of the crops. Caleb felt a deep connection to the land, to his father, and to the work he was doing. By the next morning, the suns rose pale and cold over the horizon. Caleb climbed out of the underground chamber, feeling refreshed despite the long hours of work. The field above was still intact, the plowbot ready, and the drones had moved on temporarily, though he knew they would return. Caleb worked steadily, guiding the plowbot to complete the remaining rows above ground while preparing hidden compartments for the harvested energy crop. Each movement was precise, careful, and deliberate. He worked like a dancer across the dust, moving with the rhythm of soil, machine, and sun. As midday approached, a faint shadow appeared along the horizon. Caleb squinted against the bright light. It was not a drone this time, but something larger. A hover cart, sleek and silver, gliding smoothly across the dunes. Someone was coming. He didn't panic. Instead, he prepared a simple distraction. Small reflective panels mounted on poles along the field caught the sunlight and flickered, creating the illusion of movement. Caleb guided the plowbot slowly, adjusting sensors and energy beacons to further mask the underground crop. The hover cart came closer, and a figure stepped out, scanning the fields with precise movements. Caleb recognized the uniform immediately. Zythercorp. The official carried no weapons but had tools for surveying and mapping. Caleb knew the approach would be careful, methodical. Zythercorp representatives did not rush. They observed, calculated, and acted only when they were certain of their advantage. He took a deep breath and stepped out into the open, hands resting lightly on the plowbot. "This land is private," he said calmly, voice carrying across the field. "You can look, but nothing here is for taking." The Zythercorp official raised a hand, not in aggression, but in acknowledgement. "We're only observing," the voice said, metallic from a small communicator mask. "This field has been noted in our maps. Your father's work is unusual. Most settlers don't manage this land with such care. It is remarkable, even by Nova Dakota standards." Caleb nodded slowly, understanding the subtext. They were not here to speak of kindness. They were here to judge whether the land was worth claiming. "Then you see it is well cared for," he said. "I intend to finish the harvest before anyone else interferes. That includes you. And then we will decide." With that, the hover cart moved slowly back toward the horizon, and Caleb returned to his work. The plowbot rumbled as he guided it along the final rows, planting small markers for the underground crop, ensuring that everything above and below ground was organized, measured, and protected. By late afternoon, the last above-ground rows were finished. Caleb stepped back, surveying the field. The soil was turned, neat rows stretching like golden lines in the fading sunlight. The plowbot powered down beside him, its circuits soft and humming. For the first time, Caleb felt the weight of completion in the air. The field was ready, but the underground crop still needed harvesting. Caleb descended the trapdoor once more, lantern in hand. The blue glow of the energy plants bathed the chamber in soft, calm light. Caleb carefully adjusted the harvester's small automated machines that could collect the crops without damaging them. Every stalk was handled gently, preserved for future use. Hours passed in quiet focus. The machines moved with precision, the plants responded to their touch, and Caleb monitored everything carefully. He whispered words of encouragement to himself, a habit from his father's teaching. Slow and steady. Care, always care. Finally, the last stalk of the energy crop was harvested and stored safely in insulated containers. Caleb stood in the underground chamber, looking at the empty soil, now free of the glowing plants. A wave of satisfaction washed over him. The harvest was complete, both above and below ground. He climbed back to the surface and stepped into the soft glow of the moons. The field stretched before him, quiet and perfect. The wind carried a faint hum, as if the land itself was sighing in relief. Caleb smiled faintly and whispered, almost to himself, "It's done, just like you wanted, Father." The plowbot rested quietly at the edge of the field. The wind turbines creaked softly in the night air, and the stars blinked coldly above. Caleb knew the peace would not last forever. Zythercorp would return, storms would come, and new challenges would rise. But for now, the harvest was finished, and the legacy of his father was preserved. And as he walked slowly across the rows, hands brushing the turned soil, Caleb Vance understood the truth his father had taught him. Care, patience, and quiet determination could protect even the most fragile things in the universe. Nova Dakota was vast and harsh, but for one night the Cowboys' field was safe. The next morning, the sky over Nova Dakota was pale and quiet, the twin suns rising slowly above the distant dunes. Caleb Vance stepped out of his homestead, boots crunching against the dust, and looked over the fields. The harvest was complete. Above ground, neat rows stretched to the horizon. Below ground, the energy crop was safely stored in insulated containers. For the first time in weeks, the land seemed peaceful. Yet peace on Nova Dakota was fragile. Caleb knew that Zythercorp had noticed the field, and the scouts would likely report what they had seen. He had prepared for their arrival, securing both the field and the underground harvest, but the thought of strangers moving across the plains always brought a tension that never fully eased. He climbed atop the plowbot, now idle but humming softly from residual energy, and surveyed the horizon. The plains shimmered in the morning light, and small dust animals scuttled across the open land. Caleb allowed himself a quiet smile. The farm was alive again, and his father's legacy was intact. A sudden flicker in the distance drew his attention. A hover cart appeared over the dunes, moving slowly, deliberately. Caleb recognized the insignia immediately. Zythercorp. They had come to inspect, perhaps to negotiate, or to decide whether the field was worth claiming. He didn't feel fear, only the calm focus of someone who knew the land and the machines that worked upon it. Caleb didn't hide. He walked to the center of the field, hands resting lightly on the plowbot. His shadow stretched long across the rows, the light of the suns glinting off his hat and jacket. As the hover cart approached, a single figure descended. They moved with deliberate care, scanning the field and the machines, their tools glinting faintly in the sun. "You've done well," the figure said, voice clear and calm. "Not many settlers manage this land with such care. Your father's methods are impressive. It is unusual to see a harvest completed fully, both above and below ground."
"Most are careless, most fail."
Caleb nodded slowly. "My father taught me well," he said. "I finished the work he started. Everything here has been cared for." The Zythercorp representative looked around, noting the neat rows of soil, the plowbot, and the hidden compartments for the energy crop. "This field is valuable," they said. "The energy crop you've cultivated is rare, but its care shows intelligence and patience. You have proven that the farm is in capable hands." He had expected negotiation or conflict, perhaps even demands for the harvest, but instead he was met with acknowledgement. Zythercorp valued efficiency and precision, and he had demonstrated both. "You can keep it," the official said, "as long as you continue to care for it, as your father did. The field is yours, but remember, Nova Dakota is not empty. Others will come. They may not respect the soil or the crops. They may not honor the legacy your father left behind." Caleb nodded again. "I understand. I will protect it. Always." The representative smiled faintly and returned to the hover cart. As it rose into the air, Caleb watched until it disappeared over the dunes. The land was quiet once more, the hum of the plowbot the only sound besides the wind. He allowed himself a deep breath. For now, the field was safe. Caleb spent the rest of the day inspecting the harvest, checking the machines, and adjusting sensors to monitor the land while he worked. He moved through the rows, brushing his hands across the soil, feeling the connection his father had spoken of, a quiet bond between man. Each row was a testament to care, patience, and determination. As evening fell, Caleb climbed the small hill near the homestead and looked out at the horizon. The twin suns were low, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. The wind carried whispers across the field, dust lifting in gentle spirals that caught the fading light. For the first time in weeks, Caleb felt the weight of completion settle in his chest. He thought of his father, of the lessons taught in quiet evenings, of the importance of finishing what was started, and of caring for the fragile life in the soil. His father had always said, "A farm is more than soil, it is life." "Finish what you start, Caleb. Care for it, and it will care for you." Caleb whispered into the wind, a promise to the memory of his father. "It's done." For a long time he simply stood there, watching the land. The plowbot rested quietly at the edge of the field. The wind turbines creaked softly, and the soft glow of the energy crop containers hinted at the hidden life beneath the surface. The farm was alive, thriving in the quiet of the evening. That night, Caleb sat inside the homestead, reviewing plans for the future. He checked irrigation systems, adjusted energy storage settings, and ensured that every machine was calibrated to maintain the field's balance. Though the harvest was complete, he knew the work of care was ongoing. Storms would come, travelers would pass, and Zithercorp would eventually return. But he was prepared. He lit a small lamp and opened the hollow diary left by his father. Caleb watched the familiar blue glow and listened to the recorded voice again. His father's words were calm, patient, and full of quiet wisdom. "The land is alive," the recording said. "Care for it, Caleb. Protect it. And always remember, the field is more than soil. It is legacy. It is life." Caleb closed the diary and looked out the window at the glowing horizon. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of completion that was deeper than satisfaction. The farm was safe, the energy crop was preserved, and the legacy of his father was alive. He could rest tonight knowing that he had fulfilled the promise he made, both to his father and to the land itself. The moons rose high over Nova Dakota, bathing the field in soft silver light. Caleb walked slowly among the rows, hands brushing the soil, listening to the hum of the machines and the whisper of the wind. Everything was as it should be, calm, cared for, and alive. Even in the distance, shadows moved lightly, the occasional dust swirl marking the passage of creatures or travelers. Caleb didn't fear them. He understood now that the frontier was always alive with possibilities, some friendly, some challenging. But as long as he cared for the land, the farm, and the harvest, he could meet them all. He paused at the edge of the field, looking back at the homestead, at the plowbot, at the rows of soil that stretched perfectly to the horizon. A quiet pride filled him, a pride that came from understanding the depth of work, patience, and care. His father had taught him well, and now Caleb had carried that lesson forward. The wind carried the faint hum of the desert night, and Caleb listened closely. Every sound, every vibration of the earth was part of the life of the farm. He felt connected to it in a way that went beyond effort or responsibility. This land, these crops, and the legacy of care were part of him now, as much as he was part of them. As he settled into a small chair on the porch, Caleb allowed himself a final thought. The harvest was complete. The field was safe. The work had been done with patience, with intelligence, and with respect. And in that quiet moment he understood that his father's lessons were more than instructions. They were a philosophy, a way of life, a promise that he could keep through every storm, every challenge, and every change on Nova Dakota. The moons reflected off the plowbot's surface, soft silver against polished metal. Caleb stood and touched it lightly, a silent nod to the machine that had helped him complete the harvest. "It's done," he said again, this time aloud, a declaration to the land, to his father, and to himself. In the distance, a faint glimmer of light appeared among the dunes. Caleb squinted. A ship, unlike Zithercorp, unlike any travelers he had seen before, descended slowly toward the plains. Its design was unfamiliar, sleek and quiet, but there was no immediate threat in its approach. He watched carefully, knowing that the frontier was never truly empty, and that new challenges, new stories, and new possibilities would always rise with the suns. But tonight, the farm was calm, the harvest was complete. Caleb Vance, cowboy of Nova Dakota, had fulfilled the promise to his father, and as he stood in the glow of the moons, looking over the rows of soil, the resting plowbot, and the carefully preserved energy crop, he felt a deep, quiet certainty. The legacy of care, patience, and determination would continue, no matter what came next. The frontier was vast, wild, and full of unknowns, but Caleb had learned the way of the land, the rhythm of work, and the quiet strength of finishing what was started. For now, that was enough. The cowboy had done his part. The farm was safe, and the words he had whispered to the wind, "It's done," echoed across the plains, a promise fulfilled, a legacy preserved, and a story completed. For now,